some formulation considerations before I turn it over to Richard and Melina to kind of talk a little bit about some best practices that they found. I've got some things to think about as you think about how can I not only substitute honey, but formulate new bakery foods with honey. The first is kind of obvious. It's not an exact science. Depending on your leveling system, your hydration levels, what other sweeteners are being used in the formula, you're going to get all sorts of variables. Whenever we first started this work, goodness, 9 years ago, we had a food scientist try to determine what the substitution levels were going to be. And we worked on it for a solid year before kind of throwing our hands in the air and going, there is no common substitution levels. There's just way too many variables. The general overall kind of thing to think about is whenever you use honey, you can reduce that overall sweetener usage by up to 25%. That will account for honey sweetness. So if you are looking to substitute sugar in a formula for honey, we say a good starting point is kind of lowering the overall honey usage by 25% to attain a similar level of sweetness. Another important thing whenever you bake with honey is that honey is going to keep your foods moister for longer. We talked about honey being hygroscopic. It's a humectant ingredient. It not only does it prevent moisture transfer, so by design it keeps in the moisture that's already in a product, but it's also going to pull in moisture from an environment. This is going to be really helpful compared to other dry sweeteners that you may use in keeping your bakery foods moisture for a longer period of time. I especially notice this in bread products. And you see a lot of the commercial bakeries that are trying to get more clean label by using honey as kind of that natural shelf life extension boost on their product. Honey also has the ability in bakery foods to inhibit mold growth. That's because of its pH and also because it has hydrogen peroxide components inside of honey that are going to inhibit. These hydrogen peroxide components is why you see in different countries around the world, if you work in a kitchen and you burn yourself, you cut yourself, one of the first things a chef will do will be put honey on the ingredient or honey on the wound, because it has the ability to make sure there's no infection inside of it, as well as that natural source of hydrogen peroxide. And then honey, due to its high concentration of sugars, is also going to kind of limit the growth of bacteria inside of it. Another benefit of using honey in bakery formulations, it has this ability to naturally coat, bind, and thicken everything from sauces that you may be using to bakery foods to any dairy products that you may be using in your products as well. Naturally, honey is such a great texture that is going to really improve the body and mouthfeel of a lot of products, whether it's in an icing or a glaze. If you're making granola bars or some kind of food bars or in a granola, honey's going to act as that clean label natural binder. We see all the rage on the commercial side of the baking business are these nut and seed dense bars that are kind of meal replacement. With these nut and seed dense bars, they need something to bind them all together, and the majority of them are using honey because they really do that and allow the baker to maintain that clean label. Another thing you need to concern yourself with or think about whenever formulating with is kind of the type of Maillard reaction that honey is going to cause. So honey's just like all the other sweeteners. Anytime you have a sugar, it's going to, caramelize. Sugars caramelize with heat. They give a great golden color to products. The difference with honey is that we have to remember what types of sugars are mainly in honey. So you've got your glucose and fructose. These are simple monosaccharides, so simple sugars. What this is going to do is it's going to trigger a much faster and more intense Maillard reaction than sugar will or than sucrose will. So fructose caramelizes at a much lower temperature. So what you're going to get is a sped up Maillard reaction. So what this means whenever you're baking, if you're just doing kind of a one-to-one replacement, make sure you pay close attention to your oven temperatures. You can either lower them by 25 degrees and bake a little longer to maintain that same crust, or pull them out of the oven just at an earlier period. But it is something you may have to tinker with dependent on the usage level of sugars in the formula. Honeys also may help you eliminate emulsifiers if you're using emulsifiers for anything. Obviously, it's not going to work as well as something like an egg, but it is something that is going to help pull things together. It does have some emulsification properties. Honey also, believe me, I'd love for you to use only honey in your bakery, but I know that would be a very costly, and there's some things that sugars do really well. The great thing about honey is it can not only be used as a sole sweetener, but it can be used as a sweetener in other products to either kind of supplement it to give you a good story to tell that it has honey in it, or it can be used simply for a flavor. If we're talking about some of these monofloral varieties, you know, I remember tasting that buckwheat granola. It didn't have a lot of sweetness to it. It was mainly those buckwheat flavors coming through. So you can even look at it not as a sweetener, but as an overall flavor. And it really can work in a whole bunch of different products. Another thing to consider is, unfortunately, you can't label everything, since most people on this call aren't, you know, submitting labels to the FDA. It's not something to worry about, but we all hear stories about how honey helps with allergies, about how honey is healthier than other sweeteners. We all agree with those things, and unfortunately, we can't legally say those things. So it's not something that you can scream out. Well, I guess you can. It's just you may be getting a visit from somebody if you blatantly plaster it all over your product that eating this muffin is going to help with your allergies. Another great thing about honey is it's a great flavor masker. This is something that's really, really important to think about whenever you're using a lot of whole grain products. I love whole grain products, bring on all the unique flavors, but let's face it, the American palate has not kind of advanced to whole grains. Honey is a great flavor masker. Whether you're masking some of those notions of whole grains, or if you're using other functional ingredients, everybody wants their medicine from their food now. So if you're using things like omega-3 fatty acids in a product, maybe adding fish oil to a bread or something like that, or maybe something else that consumers want, but it doesn't have a great flavor profile, honey has the ability to really mask that flavor without overwhelming the overall flavor profile of a product. Changing honey suppliers matters. If you do change honey suppliers, say you've been using one and you're using another, recognize that that honey is going to be different in flavor and taste. Also can be different ratios and certain minerals and things. So if you do switch suppliers, make sure you test before fully committing. Two final things is liquid versus dry sweeteners. You have to remember, I was dealing with somebody who was making honey where they were making it in macarons and trying to do a one-to-one replacement. And they found their honeys were very doughy and overly moist. And I said, well, did you account for the 17% moisture in honey? And they did not. So you have to think about that whenever you do add it to a formula, dependent on your usage levels. If you're using a lot of honey, yes, it's something to consider more. If you're using just a little bit of honey, it shouldn't have that big of a difference in the overall thing. And then also, there is some impact that honey is going to have on leavening, because honey is in itself a acidic ingredient. We've heard bakers tell us they balance some of that acid with a small amount of baking soda to sort of help balance it. I don't know a lot of people who do that, but it is something to kind of consider. So at this point, I'm going to stop yapping about baking with honey, since I'm just a hack baker, and turn it over to Richard and Melina. I don't know who wants to go first to kind of give their personal experiences of working with honey.
We decided that I would start first, but Melina, of course, because we work so closely on this project, is welcome to speak up anytime. So thanks, of course, to Allison and Keith for always bringing us together, and we're sorry we can't be together in Providence, but hopefully the future will have that happen. And it would be great to see people like Harry Feibelman, who's actually a Honey Summit veteran when he was a student, and Mitch, AKA Nathan Stam. So hopefully we'll all be back on campus and be able to do this in face-to-face, which is a different experience, but this is a pretty good replacement too. So Keith asked us to say, some things that we've learned about it. And I have to say, it's been a pretty amazing time. I think Keith said 9 years. And I have to admit, I think I knew some things about baking 9 years ago, but I just thought of honey as one ingredient. I didn't know the nuances. And I remember the first honey summit when we did the test that Keith described, where we make this granola with different types of honey, and also another product called Panda Peace. And I was really worried that there wouldn't be that much of a difference. And I found out and was grateful to, and was astounded to see how much of a difference these different varieties affect the final product with flavor. Like if you think about the buckwheat versus one of the lighter ones that we tasted, it's really pretty tremendous. And once you see what and taste what honeys are available to you, you can really pair them up with what you make or what you want to make. And so Patty was asking about the cookie I was making with buckwheat honey, and that's a rye sourdough cookie. It does have a rye sour in it, and so that stands up really well. But some other things that maybe are a little bit lighter or a little bit more or a little less hearty, you can use something that's a little bit lighter. And the other thing I've been thinking about, and I've been really grateful to work with a lot of honeys Keith and Allison were kind enough to send Melina and I some honeys to develop some new products, is just how amazing it is to work with them. And they do seem to have kind of, I don't mean to anthropomorphize, but personalities of their own. Keith mentioned the fermenting garlic and honey, and I have a bunch of jars lined up, and the difference between the raw honey and the pasteurized honey is amazing. The flavor, the colors are amazingly different. And to me, it's just much more rewarding. It's a lot like bread baking, which is really where my baking experience is in different types. Like working with yeast, which is a living organism. I think of honey as also this animated, ingredient that kind of really imparts characteristics of its own under our close control. I have worked on here, really got, and this was, all right, I think for a lot of people, sometimes we augment with honey, but I think I've learned that it's not as big of a feat of substituting all the sweeteners with honey as I think I might have thought it was. And using the tips that Keith just went down, those 12 tips are some new things that I haven't seen in the presentation before. I think those are really helpful. And like everyone who has experience, reformulating or refining or tweaking, I just threw out the sugar and made those slight adjustments. It's going to be sweeter. It's going to add some liquid, and found that you can dial it in pretty closely. Just a couple other things that I've thought about in the past days and during today too. One of the experiments we do with the face-to-face summit is we do a multi-grain bread, and we do it with no honey. I think it's formulated with only 5% honey, and then we also double that. And so it's not a substitution of different honeys. It's a taste test of the honey content, and it's amazing the difference between 0 and 10%. Where 0% is almost like it needs some salt. It's a little flat, it's a little bland, and so I think kudos need to be given out to honey for the flavor enhancement properties too, much the way that salt or acid does. And how once you exceed that point, it can start to get a little cloying, and then once you dial it in, it's really rounds out the product without being really apparent. And then the other thing, kind of my fun thing that I've been thinking about this week is using crystallized honey to cream. Like this cookie I'm working on is a creaming method, but it's also naturally leavened. And so I've just creamed butter and then added the honey in. Like you might have a spread, like we have this thing called a sticky station, where we kind of take butters and honeys and make these little spreads. But also the crystallized honey, some of which I have that's raw, I just was using that just as you would with physical leavening, just like you would with butter and sucrose. And you can still have that, larger volume when you cream crystallized honey with butter. So it's a way to either use crystallized honey or not worry if it gets crystallized. So those are some of my thoughts. I have plenty more, but I don't want to take it away from my good friend and baking sister Melina. So I want to let her step in and say a couple things.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see some familiar faces and meet some new people. And as Richard said, I'm sorry we're not doing this in person, but thank you, Allison and Keith, for putting together a great and instructive program. Richard hit on a lot of the really important pieces about making those substitutions and what your advantages might be, and there's a great job in that deck and considerations. For me, I found the easiest ways to substitute honey is, of course, beginning with anything that involves a liquid sugar that wouldn't be a natural sugar is an easier straight substitution without having to worry about liquid content changing in things. But the advantage to doing that is, as was noted, rather than just a straight sweet note, you're getting complexity of flavor. So for example, instead of making the chocolate pecan pie I've always made for the holidays, I used buckwheat honey instead of molasses and corn syrup, and it gave a far more complex flavor without even having to make any substitutions on that one to sweetness. And it was just, again, a very easy conversion that's there. One of the other things that I find really intrigues not just me but my customers is that it's another opportunity to play somewhat on seasonality if you have friends who are beekeepers and remind you of things like, oh, right now goldenrod honey is being pulled from the hives. And then you can use that as a way to tie into something that's really special that's happening within the calendar months as a way to highlight something that's happening with your local production as well as seasonality. So I love that. And then another component that I always keep in mind when I'm working with honey is how easy it is to work into confectionery as a better alternative than buying invertase. There's already invertase in it. So you're keeping your label cleaner by using things that already naturally exist. So one of my favorite ways for working with honey in the sweeter world, as I noted before, is using it in a liquid form. So caramelizing it or cooking it to softball. The consideration you really need to keep in mind is how fast that process goes. So for example, I was doing a side-by-side experiment with trying to bring out I was making these different scones, and I wanted to control the amount of liquid that was in it, and I wanted to heighten flavor. So I reduced maple syrup to try and bring out the flavor, and reducing honey alongside of it. Well, it's like night and day. As Keith noted, it's only 17.1% water. The second it hits boiling, it's at softball. You're ready to roll with it, and it's only a few seconds later before you hit caramelization. So that's an important note to keep in mind, but it's also a consideration in terms of the because the water content is lower, the quality, the flavor profiles are so much stronger than they would be in other liquid sugars that you may be choosing for flavor. I don't know. It's just been a fun piece. So using it to stabilize meringues and to do various types of candies and in buttercreams has been a lot of great fun. And then another point that Patty touched on when she was asking about, she was bringing up granola. I think it was Patty who said, or no, it was Allison who said that buckwheat is her favorite in the granola, and we saw that in our experiment that we do in our face-to-face. I just made a bunch of gingerbread granola, and really doing a raw substitution for something like buckwheat honey for molasses is going to bring out those sulfuric notes and those rich tones that you may be getting from molasses. But interestingly, with buckwheat honey specifically, this sweetness profile is not continuing to build as it toasts. So it becomes this beautiful foil for all of those spices. It's a lot of fun to play with.
Thank you, Melina and Richard. For
one other thing that I think, I was going to just say one other thing, Keith. When I think about us being together for the Honey Summit, and one of the activities is to go and visit some hives, and that's always an amazing experience. I never got the opportunity to do that before I started working with Allison and Keith, and a lot of the attendees never have either, right? We've been eating this stuff since we're kids, but it's quite available to you. You can find your local beekeeper. I mean, maybe they're not going to suit you up, but it's a local food that you can find, and especially in these times when we are more aware of our supply chains, and as you know, we started this talk. He started this talk really talking about the bees and the importance of them, and how we as bakers can really help the bee population, and helping the bee population in your own community, which of course is where we all have to start doing with that. It's seek them out. I just found a new beekeeper in my small little Rhode Island village the other day, and so it's a way to market your goods as more local, and it's a way to support your own local community, both financially and environmentally. So you should try that if you can.
Yeah, and it's definitely something. Richard is right. It is accessible. You know, you'd be surprised if you go to your farmer's market, not only to see a lot of beekeepers there, but how willing they are to let you come and check things out. So it's definitely something cool. I forgot to put your slides up there. Guess I don't have to do that anymore. So why honey? Let's look at a few things just to wrap this up from a standpoint of why consumers are really choosing honey. And it's really 5 things. And we think these 5 things, if you start using honey in your baking, not only is it going to lead to kind of really good, you know, products, but it's something that consumers are going to be attracted to, which we all want to do is sell more bakery foods. And we're going to look at each one of these a little bit closer. The first one is about honey as a preferred sweetener. It's funny. We've been doing this study. We do it every 2 years, where we ask consumers what their preferred sweetener is, and it's always been sugar, which has always driven us crazy, even though it's been our study. But I mean, let's face it, sugar is a lot more predominant. But this was the first year ever that in our own study, honey came out as the #1 preferred sweetener from consumers. And it's not just our study. This is Kerry Ingredients, which is a big global flavor house, and they did a big study where they asked consumers what their preferred sweetener was, and honey came out #1 in that one as well. And it also came out #1 considerably whenever they asked those same consumers, do you perceive this as a natural sweetener? So 94% of consumers perceive honey as natural, as opposed to sugar at 82%, maple syrup at 82%, and agave at 71%, and a high intensity sweetener like stevia at 46%. What's unique about these things, though, is that if you look at, sugar from a standpoint of calling itself now pure cane sugar, it's kind of been rebranded to maple syrup, to stevia, to agave. All those things are being touted as natural, all natural sweeteners, and they're all part of kind of the marketing of all these new products coming out. Is that, oh, we only use all natural sweetener. But if you dig in closer, are they really natural if they undergo a lot of processing? And this is why we think it's important to tell not only the story of honey, but also stress to your consumers that of all the sweeteners that you may be able to use, honey truly is one of the only, if not the only, completely all natural and unprocessed. It's something that bees do all the work. We're simply extracting it. Beekeepers, extractors are not manipulating the ingredient whatsoever. They're not changing its profile. And if you compare that to other sweeteners you use in your bakery, there is a lot of processing. Something like stevia starts out as a leaf. Monk fruit starts out as a fruit. Brown rice syrup starts out as rice. But by the time it gets to your bakery, it's been extreme heat. Condensation, it's been chemical enzymes been added to it to trigger things to basically get it to a usable form. Even things such as agave nectar and maple syrup go through extreme heating to evaporate that. So you're changing, you're manipulating the profile of that natural ingredient. You're basically processing it. Whereas something like honey, you get something that is pure right from the beginning and maintains that. And that's important whenever you ask consumers why they choose honey. And really the number one reason is that health halo that honey has. Number one reason why consumers say they chose honey is because it's a natural, unprocessed ingredient, even more so than flavorful. But you also have that familiar, that notion that even if it's not locally sourced or produced, consumers understand that, beekeepers and bees are working to produce honey. So there's all sorts of health benefits and health halo benefits of why consumers respond to it. And then finally, just the cause of bees. We can't stress, we took a little bit of a deep dive into how cool bees are, but they're also really, really important to our whole food ecosystem. If you think about all the ingredients you may be using in your bakery, especially when it comes time to nuts and fruits that you may be using in your bakery, if we lose bees, we're not only losing honey, but we're losing a lot of those other ingredients. And consumers understand that. This was a Nielsen study where they asked consumers of whenever you purchase food, what causes are you aware of? And buy local was number one, not surprisingly, but we were surprised to find out that decline in bee population was number two. Whenever they further asked, what are you more interested in learning more about, decline in bee populations became the number one thing. This survey right here was one of the main reasons we launched a big campaign last year for National Honey Month called Honey Saves Hives, where it was a big push about how whenever you buy products with honey in them, you're help support the honey industry, helping put more funds into honeybee research. We partnered with a couple national brands that then dedicated a portion of their honey products that they sold to help fund honeybee research. So it is something that consumers are really, really concerned with. So whenever you use honey at your bakery, make sure you're telling consumers that you are using honey because it is something they care about. So to wrap it up, I've got a baker's dozen of either action items or inspiration, 13 really quick things that hopefully we can all do after we leave today. The first one is maybe think of some new uses of honey. Beyond just bakery foods. Think of the natural pairings. Tea and honey is a big thing. And one of my favorite bakery foods I ever had was from down in Born and Bred Bakehouse in Florida. And they do a Earl Grey and honey cruffin, which is their kind of mash between a croissant and a muffin. And it is truly an amazing flavor complement. So think about sort of how honey pairs with those breakfast kind of flavors like tea whenever you formulate potential recipes. Also, if you're serving coffee at your bakery, think about pushing honey as a replacement sweetener for sugar. This is something whenever we started 10 years ago, we always talked about it being a potential, and it never really took off. But now you can go to Starbucks and get honey coffees. You can go to Pete's. You can go to all these coffee shops and see a lot more honey being used. So it's something you can maybe bring to your bakery. If you have a favorite honey recipe, submit it to us. We've been working with Richard and Melina to put together kind of a next generation of honey baking summit recipes that we're going to promote. But we also work with bakers. So if you produce a honey recipe and want it published, we will publish it. We've done some great work in the past with some of the bakers who have attended our events. Promote pollination to your customers. A lot of people just think of honeybees as honey, but they don't realize what happens if we lose honeybees, about how we lose 35% of our calories, basically, 87 different crops that we all know and love. Everything from almonds, which you see in this picture, to figs, to carrots, to watermelon, to cocoa, to pears. All these things require honeybee pollination, and we lose those. In Providence, Whole Foods did a really, I thought I had that slide, I didn't, but they did a really cool thing where they showed what their store would look like without honeybees. And maybe it could be a campaign that you consider at your bakery. If you think of all the products you use, maybe during Honey Month, run a campaign where certain things you cross off your menu to bring awareness to the importance of honeybees, because you can't do a blueberry muffin without honey, because there's no blueberries without honeybees. Take advantage of varietals. We've talked a lot about that. This is a great product that Dominique Ansel does, where they basically make a mini mandolin and they flavor them based on season with different varietals of honey. And Melina touched on that. That local and seasonal is really a great way to kind of use honey. Your honeys that you get in the springtime that are coming fresh from the hive are going to be really light and delicate, whereas the honey from the fall is going to be darker and more robust in flavor. So use that to your advantage, whether you're doing something like a honey banana double baked croissant using a lighter honey, or something a little more on the savory side, like this miso honey roasted eggplant flatbread. Really kind of pair those different honeys with the seasonal. And Melina also touched on this, is don't just think of it as something as kind of a main core thing in your formula, whether you're a bread or a dessert, but think of it as a way to add an accent to icings, also to things like glazes. Honey really provides an interesting flavor dynamic. Richard brought up the sticky station. This is great. This is something we do with retail bakeries every Honey Month. This, I believe, is from Gracious Bakery. Yeah, Gracious Bakery down in New Orleans, to where they set up a sticky station where they put 3 different varietals of honey, and you can add it to your bakery food or to your coffee. It's a real fun project. Also, don't think of honey just as sweet. Also is great in savory products. One of my favorite one, because it's local here in St. Louis, is this 4 cheese and orange blossom honey focaccia from Nathaniel Reed Bakery. That truly is delicious. But you can also use it in various flatbreads to kind of add that sweetness and savory to various things. There is a small group of people, even though I love honey, I think they're all crazy, who put honey on their pizza. It baffles me. It's not something I do or enjoy. It's one of the few honey applications, but they're out there, and they seem to be growing, because I have more and more people tell me they drizzle honey all over their pizza. Obviously, honey cakes are great. We're going to send you a bunch of recipes. This is one of my favorite. That's a really great honey cake with dark beer. Then breads. This is my favorite bread recipe that we're going to send you, which is a honey Volcorn bread. I love seeds, grains, all that fun stuff. And this is a great recipe that really has that honey coming through and kind of providing a nice kind of flavor to some of these products. And then desserts as well. whether we're talking about tarts or other specialty desserts. And again, we're going to send you all these recipes so you have all the instructions on them. And then the final two things is, if you do use honey, bring up the honeybees. Consumers love it. It's something they respond to. Even the big companies are doing it. General Mills, I wish they used a lot more honey in their Honey Nut Cheerios, but I will give them kudos for really raising the profile of honeybees, not only by talking about pollination on their products, but then they also do this billboard that's made out of beehives, and then they take the honey from these beehives and do specially released cereal boxes. So it's something where if you are using honey at your bakery, kind of maybe talk about the honey or who's producing the honey you're buying from, whether it's somebody local to have that local tie-in, or even somebody national that you got this honey from the Willamette Valley of Oregon. It's all part of that great story to tell. And then the last thing is Honey Month. We do Honey Month every year with about 15 retail bakers where we partner with them. We send them buckets of honey so they can add honey products to their menus for the month of September. And we also send them the things you need for a sticky station, signage, as well as information on honeybees. We're going to blow up this program next year because honeybees are so important. So we're looking to partner with 30 to 50 bakeries. So if you're interested, have baker friends that are interested. It's free of charge. All you have to do is add honey items to your menu and promote them throughout September, and we send you a bunch of honey and all these fun other things to share with your consumers. So Allison will definitely be reaching out to you after this to talk about some of those fun and amazing things. I really appreciated all of our time here. I wish we could have our hands in the dough and working like we used to. But I really do appreciate you guys kind of taking time out of your day. Thank you to Richard and Melina for coming in. You've been such a great part of this program and helping us expand it. And it's good to see we can do it not only in person, but also virtually as well. So if anybody has questions, feel free to ask them. My email's up there too. You can reach out to me. Allison's going to be sending all the presentations to everybody, as well as all the formulas we've developed in the past. So I just want to thank you guys again for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Perfect.
I had
Have
a
great-
question. I had a question, Keith,
Oh,
if
yes,
I
definitely.
may. Earlier in your presentation, you said that honey diminishes bitterness and sourness. And then later you said that it's a flavor masker for other things. Are those two separate things, flavor masking and diminishing those other notes? And I'm
Yes.
just
Yeah, it is two kind of separate things for the most part. And that's because of the gluconic acid is really kind of elevating the good things. And then overall, honey just has that acid load that masks as well as subdues. So I don't know if I technically have the specific reason about why it is different, but I know it is two kind of different things working.
Thank you. And I did want to say hi to Harry, who I knew as Harold a long time ago. And thank you for a great program to all of you.
Perfect.
I enjoyed it.
Excellent. Well, everybody have a great rest of your day, and hopefully we'll be seeing everybody in person next year. Fingers crossed. Maybe sometime in the fall, as opposed to our normal late spring, summer kind of meeting. So thanks a lot, everybody, and have a great day.